Have you ever looked at your life and thought, this is it, this is perfect? Not perfect in a fairy tale, happily ever after kind of way, but perfect in its beautiful, messy, real-world glory. That was my life. Or at least that's what I believed for 15 years. 15 years of building a home, a partnership, a future with the one person I thought I knew better than I knew myself. My husband Leo. The name itself sounds strong, doesn't it? Like a lion. King of his domain. And he was. He was charismatic, brilliant, the kind of man who could walk into a room of strangers and leave with 10 new friends and 3 business deals. He was my rock, my partner, my everything. And he was also the man who systematically, meticulously, and without a single flicker of remorse, stole $2 million from our life savings. And in doing so, he stole my future. But what he didn't count on, what he could never have anticipated in his wildest, most arrogant dreams, was that the woman he left shattered on the floor would be the one to orchestrate his downfall. He thought he took everything from me. He was wrong. He just gave me a reason to become someone he would never see coming. My name is Amelia, and this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about how I made him regret ever underestimating the woman he married. Our story began, like so many others, a classic New York City romance. I was a fledgling interior designer full of ambition, but with a portfolio thin enough to see through. He was a financial consultant, sharp-witty with a smile that could disarm armies. We met at a friend's rooftop party, the city lights twinkling below us like a carpet of fallen stars. He told me I had a classic elegance, that my eyes held the kind of depth he could spend a lifetime exploring. I was hooked. We spent the next year in a whirlwind of romance late-night talks, in cozy diners, spontaneous weekend trips to the Hudson Valley, dreaming of a future together. We married at a small, beautiful ceremony in a historic courthouse, promising to be partners in everything. And for a long time we were. My design firm took off my name, becoming synonymous with a certain kind of warm, modern luxury. Leo's career soared alongside mine. We were the power couple, the ones our friends looked to with a mixture of admiration and envy. We built our dream house in Westchester, a sprawling glass and cedar structure that I designed myself, every line and angle a testament to our shared aesthetic. And we saved. Oh, how we saved. Coming from a modest background, I learned the value of $1 early on. My parents were hard-working people who clipped coupons and budgeted every penny. That financial discipline was ingrained in me. Leo seemed to share that value. We created a joint savings account, our vineyard fund, we called it. The dream was to one day buy a small vineyard in Napa, to grow old together, sipping wine made from our own grapes, watching the California sun set behind the hills. It was our endgame, the symbol of all our hard work. Every major commission I landed, every bonus he received, a significant chunk, went straight into that account. We watched it grow from a few thousand to 100,000, then $1 million, and finally just past the $2 million mark. It was our nest egg, our security, our shared dream solidified in numbers on a bank statement. The change was so subtle at first I barely noticed it. A few more late nights at the office for Leo. A little more distance in his eyes when I tried to talk about our future. He'd become more protective of his phone, angling it away from me when a text came in. I brushed it off as stress. His work was demanding. The market was volatile. I told myself I needed to be a more supportive wife. I'd run him a bath, cook his favorite meal, try to bring back the easy intimacy we once shared. He'd smile, thank me, but the connection felt buffered. Like I was speaking to him through a pane of glass. He started talking about a new high-risk, high-reward investment fund he was managing for a few exclusive clients. "It's the future, Amy," he'd say, his eyes gleaming with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. "This is how we turn our 2 million into 10. I was hesitant. I believed in slow, steady growth in the security we had built. "Don't you trust me?" he'd ask, a slight edge to his voice. And that was his trump card. Of course I trusted him. He was Leo, my Leo. The first real crack in the facade appeared on a Tuesday. I was at a charity auction, a gala for the Children's Health Foundation, an event I had helped design the decor for. I was feeling proud, floating on a cloud of champagne and professional satisfaction. The final item for auction was an exclusive trip to a private island in the Maldives, a dream vacation. On a whim, feeling generous and wanting to surprise Leo, I raised my paddle. The bidding was fierce, but I was determined. "I won!" The room applauded. I walked to the payment table, my heart soaring, and handed them my personal credit card. Declined. I laughed it off, slightly embarrassed. "Try it again," I said. Declined. A cold knot began to form in my stomach. I gave them our joint debit card, the one linked to our primary checking account. Declined for insufficient funds. It was impossible. I knew for a fact there was over $50,000 in that account just last week. The woman at the table looked at me with pity. My face burned with a humiliation so intense it felt like a physical fever. I made a clumsy excuse about a banking error and slunk away, the dream trip, forgotten, replaced by a gnawing dread. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A bank glitch, a fraudulent charge, but deep down, a darker truth was beginning to surface. I walked into our silent house, the beautiful home I had designed, and it suddenly felt like a stranger's house, cold and unfamiliar. I went straight to my office, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type in the password to our online banking portal. I clicked on our checking account. The balance was $127.34. I felt the air leave my lungs. Then, my heart pounding in my ears, I clicked on the tab for our savings. The Vineyard Fund. Our dream. Our future. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, my brain refusing to process the number it was seeing. $2 million, 15 years of work, of sacrifice, of shared promises, all of it gone. The balance read $0. The world went silent. The only sound was the frantic, terrified beating of my own heart. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this was no bank error. This was a betrayal. And as I sat there in the ruins of the life, I thought I had a new feeling began to bloom amidst the shock and the pain. It was cold, it was sharp, and it was utterly clear. It was rage. And I knew this was far from over. If you've ever felt that gut punch of betrayal, if you've ever had the ground beneath you crumble away, then you know the journey I was about to begin. Before I tell you what I did next, before I walk you through every step of the meticulous plan I built from the ashes of my marriage, hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss how this story ends. Sitting there bathed in the cold blue light of the monitor, the world seemed to shrink until it was just me and that impossible number. 0. $0. 0 cents. 0 future. It's a strange thing, Shock. It doesn't feel like a loud explosion. It's a profound and terrifying silence. My hearing tunneled the ambient noises of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant groan of the pipes faded into nothing. My first thought wasn't anger, it was denial. A frantic, desperate scramble for any other explanation. I must have logged into the wrong account. This was a phishing site. This was a massive system-wide banking error that would be on the news by morning. I refreshed the page. Once, twice, 10 times. The number remained stark and absolute. $0. I navigated to the transaction history, my fingers feeling like clumsy foreign objects on the keyboard. And there it was. Not a single catastrophic withdrawal which somehow might have been easier to comprehend. No, this was far more insidious. It was a series of transfers beginning 6 months ago. The first one was small, almost unnoticeable, $50,000. The memo line read, "Investment capital transfer." A month later, another $100,000, then $250,000. The amounts grew larger, the frequency increasing like a predator growing bolder with each successful hunt. The final transfer draining the last $500,000 from the account had happened just last week. All of them were authorized from an IP address I didn't recognize, but they were all initiated with Leo's security credentials. My body started to shake, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that began in my core and radiated outwards. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold my own body together as my world fell apart. A slideshow of memories flickered behind my eyes, each one now tainted, recontextualized by this horrifying discovery. Leo, just 2 nights ago, kissing my forehead as he headed to bed, whispering, "I love you, Amy. You and me against the world." Leo last month talking about our vineyard, even pulling up pictures of properties on his laptop, his face full of excitement. "This one has an old farmhouse we could renovate," he'd said. "You'd make it beautiful." Was he looking at me, or was he looking through me at the money he was actively stealing? Every shared laugh, every intimate moment, every promise for the future now felt like a meticulously crafted lie. The man I had shared my bed with, the man I had built a life with, was a complete stranger. The betrayal was so profound, it was like discovering the very ground I stood on was a hologram. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually the numbness receded and a hot, searing wave of agony washed over me. I stumbled to the bathroom and wrenched my body, trying to expel a poison that was purely emotional. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was a ghost. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a terror I had never known. Who was I without him? Who was I without the future we had planned? We weren't just a married couple. We were a unit, an entity. Leo and Amelia. Our names were rarely spoken apart. The thought of untangling my identity from his was as terrifying as the financial ruin itself. I sank to the cold tile floor, the tears finally coming hot and silent. I didn't sob. I just leaked my body, overflowing with a grief too vast for sound. The sound of his key in the front door was like a gunshot in the silent house. My tears stopped instantly, replaced by a surge of adrenaline so potent it made my vision sharpen. I scrambled to my feet, wiping my face, and walked back to the office, my movements stiff and robotic. I sat down in my chair just as he walked in, shrugging off his coat. He smiled, that easy, charming smile that had once made my heart flutter. Now it looked like a mask. "Hey, Honorable Longday, how was the gala?" he asked, loosening his tie. I stared at him, my face a carefully blank canvas. I needed to see his performance. I needed to witness the lie firsthand. "It was fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "There was a little issue with the card when I tried to pay for the auction item." I watched his face. For a split second, a flicker of something, was it panic, crossed his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He was a master. "Oh, really?" he said, feigning concern. "Damn these banks. Probably a fraud alert. You should call them in the morning." "Don't worry about it." He walked over to stand behind my chair, placing his hands on my shoulders, his touch making my skin crawl. "You look tired," he murmured, his voice laced with that fake practiced tenderness. "Let's open a bottle of wine and forget about it." I wanted to scream. I wanted to fly at him, to claw at that handsome lying face until the monster underneath was revealed. I wanted to demand answers, to force him to look at the zero on the screen and explain the wasteland he had made of our lives. But some primal instinct for self-preservation kicked in. A raw animal cunning I never knew I possessed. Showing my hand now would be a mistake. He was a professional liar, a manipulator. He would have a story for everything, a perfectly plausible explanation that would twist the facts, paint me as hysterical, and make me doubt my own sanity. He had been planning this for months, maybe longer. My reaction in this moment was pure, raw emotion. To win this, I couldn't be emotional. I needed a plan. I forced a small smile and leaned back slightly into his touch, a move that cost me every ounce of my self-control. "You're right. It's probably nothing. I'm just tired." I closed the laptop. Wine sounds perfect. We spent the rest of the evening in a surreal pantomime of our normal life. He opened a bottle of expensive Cabernet he'd been saving. He talked about his day, about a difficult client and a successful pitch. I nodded and asked the right questions, my mind a million miles away, replaying the transaction history, the dates, the amounts. Every word out of his mouth was a lie. His casual mentions of our future of the vineyard were daggers twisting in my gut. How could he do this? How could he sit here sipping wine in the house I designed and look me in the eye while knowing he had utterly destroyed me? As I watched him, I realized the man I married was gone. Maybe he never existed at all. The person sitting across from me was a predator, and I had been his prey for 15 years. Later that night, I lay in our bed, my back to him, feigning sleep. I listened to the sound of his steady breathing, the rhythm that had once been a comfort to me. Now it sounded like the calm, even breaths of a monster. The grief and shock were still there, a massive black hole in my chest, but something else was solidifying around it, resolve. Cold, hard, and unyielding. He wouldn't get away with this. He thought he had won. He thought I was just the creative, slightly naive wife who handled the aesthetics while he handled the real business of money. He had miscalculated. He had forgotten that a designer's greatest skill is not just making things beautiful, but understanding structure. A designer knows that to build something new, you first have to understand the foundations of what's already there. And if those foundations are rotten, you have to tear the whole thing down to the studs. My old life was gone. My marriage was a lie. Fine. It was time to design a new reality. And in this one, I wouldn't be the victim. I would be the architect. My plan was just a vague outline in the darkness, but I knew its foundation. I would play the part of the loving, unsuspecting wife, all while I gathered my tools, drew my blueprints, and prepared to demolish his world as thoroughly as he had demolished mine. The next morning was the first day of my new life, a life of duplicity. I woke up before Leo, a common occurrence, but this time the familiar routine felt alien. Making coffee, looking out at the dew on the lawn, everything was cast in a harsh new light. I felt like an actress on a set, every movement rehearsed, every line carefully considered. When Leo came downstairs dressed in one of his impeccably tailored suits, I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. The gesture was ash in my mouth. Morning, I said, my voice, a perfect imitation of my usual cheerfulness. I made your favorite dark roast. He smiled, oblivious. You're the best, Amy. The casual intimacy of the moment was a grotesque parody, and I had to physically anchor myself to the kitchen counter to keep from recoiling. The first rule of my silent war was established: maintain normalcy at all costs. Any deviation from our routine would raise his suspicion, and suspicion was an enemy I couldn't afford. My first call was to the one person in the world I knew I could trust without reservation, my best friend, Chloe. Chloe and I had been friends since college, an unbreakable bond forged over cheap pizza all-night study sessions and navigating the treacherous waters of our 20s. She was everything. I wasn't cynical, brutally honest, and pragmatic to a fault. Where I saw the best in people, Chloe looked for the hidden agenda. She was a litigator at a top law firm in the city, and her mind was as sharp and unforgiving as a shard of glass. I waited until Leo left for work, the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway a starting pistol for my real day. I took my phone and walked out into the garden, pacing the stone pathway as I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Amelia. To what do I owe the honor of a pre-9 a.m. call? Did you finally decide to leave that man-child of a client who wants a Moroccan-themed bathroom in his colonial mansion? Her voice was brisk, her humor dry as ever. Chloe, I said, and my voice broke. The carefully constructed facade of the morning crumbled. Something's happened. I told her everything. I started with the declined card at the gala and ended with the $0 balance on the screen. I recounted the years of saving the Vineyard Fund, the late-night talks about our future. With every word, I felt the story become more real, more horrifying. For the first time in our 20-year friendship, Chloe was silent. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, the sharp, controlled breaths of a lawyer processing a truly catastrophic set of facts. When she finally spoke, her voice was devoid of its usual sarcasm. It was cold steel. Okay, Amelia. Listen to me very carefully. Do not confront him. Do not let him know you know anything. You said you acted normal last night. Good. Keep doing that. We need to be smart about this. Smart, Chloe, he took everything. I cried, my voice rising in panic. There's nothing left. I need to scream at him. I need to. You need to shut up and listen, she cut in her tone, leaving no room for argument. Screaming gets you nothing but a slammed door and a chance for him to disappear. He's a financial guy, Amy. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated campaign. He has a plan, and you can bet your ass that plan includes a strategy for when you find out. We are not going to play his game. We are going to create our own. She told me to come to her office. Don't drive your car. It has a tracker. He probably installed it years ago. Take an Uber. Pay with cash. Don't bring your phone. Buy a burner phone on the way. This is how we operate now. We are ghosts. The instructions were terrifying, but they also gave me a strange sense of purpose. This was real. This was a battle, and I had just found my general. I followed her instructions to the letter, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a grim, exhilarating focus. Sitting in Chloe's stark, minimalist office overlooking the city, I felt a world away from my beautiful, lie-filled home in Westchester. She had a yellow legal pad in front of her, and she was mapping out our strategy like a general planning a military campaign. First things first, she said, her pen scratching furiously. Lawyers. You need a divorce attorney, a forensic accountant, and possibly a criminal lawyer. I have names. The best. They are discreet and they are sharks. A criminal lawyer, the words felt foreign. Yes, Amelia. What he did is a federal crime. Multiple federal crimes, actually. Wire, fraud, embezzlement. The list is long. The idea of seeing Leo in handcuffs sent a strange, cold thrill through me. But Chloe shook her head. That's one path. The official path. It's messy, it's public, and it can take years. And given how long he's been planning this, there's a good chance the money is long gone hidden in offshore accounts that are nearly impossible to trace. You might get the satisfaction of seeing him in jail, but you'll likely never see a dime. So, what's the other path? I asked, leaning forward. Chloe looked at me, her dark eyes intense. The other path is the one where we don't just get justice, we get restitution. We find out where the money went, why he took it, and we leverage that information to get it back, or at least a portion of it. We dismantle his life with the same quiet precision he used to dismantle yours. But to do that, we need information. We need to know his secrets. All of them. That was the moment my revenge began to take shape, not as a wild emotional outburst, but as a cold, calculated strategy. We would wage a silent war. The first step was surveillance. Chloe gave me the number of a private investigator, a man named Marcus Thorne. He's ex-Mossad, she said, as if that explained everything. He's expensive, but he's the best. He can find out anything about anyone. That evening when Leo came home, I was the perfect wife. I had cooked his favorite dinner, coq au vin. I asked about his day, feigning interest in his stories of market fluctuations and demanding clients. Every smile was a lie, every touch a betrayal of my own feelings. Living this double life was the hardest thing I had ever done. It was an exhausting 24/7 performance. I felt like a spy in my own home. I started noticing things I'd been blind to before, the way he would always take calls in his office with the door closed. The second older laptop he kept in his briefcase that he never used when I was around. The way his eyes would occasionally glaze over, as if he was looking at something far away. I was living with an enemy, and the intimacy of our shared life, the toothbrushes in the same holder, the clothes mingling in the same closet, became a source of constant low-grade horror. A few days later, I met Marcus Thorne in a nondescript coffee shop in Queens. He was not what I expected. He was a small, unassuming man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and a weary expression. But his eyes missed nothing. They scanned the room constantly, taking in every detail. I told him the story, my voice low and steady. He listened without interruption, nursing a black coffee. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Your friend Chloe is right," he said, his voice, a low, gravelly hum. "A direct confrontation is amateur hour. You're a ghost. He doesn't know you exist. That's our advantage." He laid out his plan. He would put a full surveillance team on Leo, physical and digital. They would track his movements, clone his phones, hack his emails, and follow the money trail. "It won't be cheap," he warned. I thought of the empty savings account. "I have my own money," I said, thinking of my business account, the one thing Leo hadn't been able to touch. "My firm's account. Do it." The war had officially begun. I was now funding an investigation into my own husband using the money from the business we had supposedly built together. The irony was bitter, but it also tasted like power. I was no longer just a victim reacting to a tragedy. I was an active participant in the story, seizing control of the narrative. Every night I would lie next to Leo, feigning sleep, while my mind raced with strategies and possibilities. He thought he was sleeping next to the woman he had broken. He had no idea he was sleeping next to the woman who was going to burn his world to the ground. He had stolen my money and my past, but I was about to steal his future. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological endurance. On the surface, life was a serene river of domesticity. I hosted a dinner party for our friends where I laughed at Leo's anecdotes and played the role of the gracious hostess. I consulted with clients on fabric swatches and lighting fixtures, my professional life, a welcome refuge of order and control. I even went with Leo to look at a new car for him, a sleek, absurdly expensive Porsche he'd been eyeing. "We deserve to enjoy the fruits of our labor, don't we?" he'd said, draping an arm around me in the dealership. I had smiled and agreed, all the while thinking of Marcus's team probably listening to every word, the cost of the car, a fresh splash of salt in my wounds. Every moment was a performance, every interaction a carefully calibrated lie. The strain was immense. I felt a constant low-level hum of anxiety, a tightness in my chest that never went away. I lost weight. Sleep offered little escape, my dreams filled with images of falling, of empty rooms, of Leo's smiling face turning into a stranger's. My only lifeline was the burner phone and the daily updates from Marcus. His texts would come in at odd hours, cryptic and brief. "Package delivered. Asset is mobile. Upload in progress." Each message was a small piece of a puzzle I couldn't yet see. Marcus had set up a secure, encrypted online portal where his team uploaded their findings. Every night after Leo was asleep, I would slip out of bed and lock myself in my design studio, the one space in the house that still felt truly mine. There, with a cup of chamomile tea that did little to calm my nerves, I would delve into the secret life of my husband. It was like peeling back the layers of an onion, and every layer revealed a more rotten core. The first reports were financial. Marcus's forensic accountant, a woman so brilliant, Chloe, referred to her only as the Oracle had begun to untangle the web Leo had woven. The $2 million from our savings hadn't just been transferred to a single account. It had been systematically laundered. The money was funneled through a series of shell corporations with innocuous names like Mid-Atlantic Logistics and Apex Global Consulting. From there it was wired to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, then moved again, split into smaller amounts, and shuffled through so many different entities that it was almost impossible to trace. It was a professional, sophisticated operation. This wasn't the desperate act of a man in debt. This was the work of a seasoned criminal. The Oracle noted that this kind of complex structuring wasn't just to hide the money from me. It was designed to be invisible to federal investigators. Leo wasn't just planning for a divorce, he was planning for a disappearing act. Then came the digital surveillance. Marcus's team had successfully cloned Leo's phones and gained access to his emails, both the one I knew about and a secret encrypted one he used for his real business. Reading his messages was a nauseating experience. I saw the calculated lies he told his clients, promising them impossible returns on high-risk investments while using their money to pay off other investors, a classic Ponzi scheme. He was a con artist, and our friends, our family, the people who trusted him with their life savings were all his marks. The scale of his deception was breathtaking. He wasn't just a thief. He was a predator who preyed on trust. My personal betrayal, as devastating as it was just one small part of a much larger universe of deceit. The physical surveillance reports painted an equally grim picture. He wasn't working the long hours he claimed. His late nights at the office were often long, leisurely dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. His business trips were weekend getaways to lavish hotels. But he was always alone. The reports consistently showed him dining alone, checking into hotels alone. It was strange. If he had stolen $2 million, where was the celebration? Where was the high life? He was spending a fortune, yes, but there was a loneliness to his movements, a solitary nature to his extravagance that didn't quite make sense. Where was all this money going? Who was he doing this for? The breakthrough came one rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was in the city meeting a client when my burner phone vibrated. It was a message from Marcus. Check the portal. Urgent. I made an excuse and hurried to a nearby coffee shop, my heart hammering against my ribs. I logged in and there was a new file in the folder labeled Financial Disbursements. It was a series of wire transfers, not from the shell corporations, but from one of the Swiss accounts. These were different. They weren't large, sporadic amounts. They were regular monthly payments. $25,000 wired on the first of every month for the past 2 years. The recipient wasn't a company. It was a person. A woman named Isabelle Dubois. I stared at the name. Isabelle Dubois. It meant nothing to me. I had never heard Leo mention her. She wasn't a client, not one I knew of anyway. I clicked on another file Marcus had uploaded. It was a background check. Isabelle Dubois, age 28, former art gallery assistant. Currently lists her occupation as freelance art consultant. And then I saw her address a luxury condominium on the Upper East Side, in a building known for its celebrity residents and exorbitant prices. The monthly maintenance fees alone were more than my first salary. A quick search of the property records showed that the condo had been purchased 2 years ago in cash for $3.5 million by a holding company. A holding company that the Oracle had just recently linked to Leo. My mind was reeling. Who was this woman? A business partner, a blackmailer, the regular payments, the luxury apartment. It felt personal. I scrolled down and saw that Marcus had attached a surveillance photo. It was taken from across the street from the condo building. It showed Leo, my husband, walking out of the front entrance. He was smiling, a genuine, relaxed smile I hadn't seen on his face in years. His arm was around a woman. She was tall, beautiful, with a cascade of dark wavy hair. She was looking up at him with an expression of pure adoration. She was Isabelle Dubois. The coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor, but I didn't notice. The pieces of the puzzle were finally clicking into place, and the image they formed was more monstrous than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about the money. It was never just about the money. He hadn't stolen our future to fund a business or escape debt. He had stolen it to build a new life, a whole other life with a whole other woman. The solitude, the lonely dinners, it was all a lie. He had a home to go to. It just wasn't ours. The Ponzi scheme, the shell corporations, the $2 million from our savings, it was all for her. My husband, the man I had loved for 15 years, didn't just have a secret. He had a secret family. And the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't just a victim of theft. I was the other woman in my own marriage. Discovering the existence of Isabelle Dubois was like a second detonation, a blast that leveled whatever was left standing after the initial discovery of the financial ruin. The theft of the money was a betrayal of our partnership, of our shared goals. But this was a betrayal of our intimacy, of our history, of the very identity I had wrapped myself in for 15 years. The fact that he had a mistress was a dagger to the heart. The fact that he had bought her a multi-million-dollar apartment, that he was funding her lavish lifestyle with the money we had saved with the dream of our vineyard, was a complete desecration. It retroactively poisoned every memory, every I love you, every shared moment. My grief was no longer just for a lost future. It was for a past that I now realized was a complete and utter fraud. I left the coffee shop in a daze, walking through the bustling New York streets without seeing them. The city I had always loved, the city that felt like home, suddenly felt hostile and alien. Every happy couple I saw, every person laughing on their phone, felt like a personal insult. I ended up at Chloe's office, bypassing the secretary and walking straight in. One look at my face, and she canceled her next meeting. I didn't have to say a word. I just slid my burner phone across her desk, the picture of Leo and Isabel glowing on the screen. She studied it for a long moment, her expression hardening into one of pure fury. "That son of a bitch," she whispered. "That absolute pathological son of a bitch." She let me cry. She poured me a glass of whiskey from a bottle she kept in her filing cabinet for emergencies, and I sat on the plush leather sofa in her office and let the grief I had been bottling up for weeks pour out of me. It was an ugly, messy, cathartic breakdown. I mourned my marriage. I mourned the man I thought I knew, and most of all, I mourned my own naivety. How could I have been so blind? The signs were all there, the late nights, the emotional distance, the secret phone calls. I had chosen to interpret them as stress, as the actions of a devoted husband working hard for our future. The truth was, he was working hard, but it was for his future with her. Chloe listened patiently, handing me tissues and refilling my glass. She didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. She just let me feel the full crushing weight of the betrayal. When the tears finally subsided, replaced by a hollow exhaustion, she sat down next to me. "Okay," she said softly. "The game has changed. This isn't just about money anymore. This is about annihilation." Her words, as harsh as they were, resonated with a cold, hard stone that was forming where my heart used to be. "What do we do, Chloe?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What's the next move?" "The logical move," she said, switching back into lawyer mode, "is to use this as leverage. We add adultery to the divorce petition. In New York, it won't get you a bigger settlement, but the threat of public exposure can be a powerful negotiating tool. We can use this Isabel to pressure him." I shook my head. The thought of a quiet behind-the-scenes negotiation felt deeply unsatisfying. It felt like letting him get away with it. "No," I said, a new kind of resolve hardening my voice. "That's not enough. A negotiation implies he has something I want. He doesn't. The money is just paper. What he took from me is my sense of self, my history. You can't negotiate that back. I don't want to negotiate. I want to obliterate." Chloe studied my face. "What are you thinking, Amelia?" "I'm thinking that for the past 15 years I've been a character in a story he was writing. The supportive wife, the creative partner. It was all a role he assigned me. Now I'm going to write my own story. And in my story, the two women he thought he was playing against each other are going to be on the same team." Chloe's eyes widened. "You're going to talk to her, Amelia. That's insane. She's not going to be on your side. She's the mistress. She's living in a $5 million condo funded by your life savings. She won. Did she?" I countered the idea, taking shape in my mind with startling clarity. "Or is she just another one of his assets, another pawn in his game? Think about it, Chloe. A man like Leo, a man capable of this level of deception, Do you really think he's capable of genuine love? Do you think he's honest with her? He's a professional liar. Lying is what he does. It's who he is. What are the chances that she knows the full story, that she knows about me, about the Ponzi scheme, about the money he stole? I'd wager they're close to zero. My mind was racing, connecting the dots. He's isolated her in a gilded cage. He pays for everything, which means he controls everything. She's completely dependent on him. She's probably just as much a victim as I am, she just doesn't know it yet. Chloe was skeptical. That's a massive gamble, Amy. What if she is in on it? What if she laughs in your face and calls him the second you leave? Then I'll know, I said. Then I'll know exactly who my enemy island. But my gut tells me this woman has no idea what she's involved in. Marcus's report said she used to be an art gallery assistant. She's 28. She met Leo 2 years ago. He probably fed her some sob story that he was a widower or trapped in a loveless, sexless marriage. He preyed on her youth and her dreams just like he preyed on my trust. The plan was audacious, risky, and emotionally treacherous, but it felt right. It felt like the only move on the chessboard that Leo would never in a million years anticipate. He had built his empire on a foundation of divide and conquer. He kept his worlds separate, confident that they would never collide. I was going to make them collide in the most spectacular way possible. I spent the next few days in a strange state of limbo. I went through the motions of my life with Leo, the dinners, the conversations, but my mind was elsewhere rehearsing what I would say to Isabel. I had Marcus do a deeper dive on her. The picture that emerged was of a young woman who was somewhat lost. She had moved to New York from a small town in Ohio with dreams of making it in the art world. She was bright and talented but struggling. And then she met Leo. Shortly after they met, she quit. Her job moved into the condo, and her social media, which had once been full of art and friends, became a curated collection of travel photos, designer clothes, and expensive meals. But like Leo's surveillance reports, there was a loneliness to it. She was always alone in the photos or with Leo. There were no friends, no family. It solidified my resolve. This was not a partnership. It was a possession. I chose my moment carefully. It was a Thursday. Leo had told me he was flying to Chicago for a 2-day conference. Marcus's surveillance confirmed he had actually flown to the Caribbean with Isabel. They would be gone for 3 days. The gilded cage was empty. That afternoon, I took an Uber to the Upper East Side. Standing outside her gleaming, opulent building, my heart pounded in my chest. This was it. This was the point of no return. I wasn't just confronting the other woman. I was stepping through the looking glass into the secret world my husband had built on the ruins of my own. I took a deep breath, walked past the doorman with a confidence I did not feel, and stepped into the elevator, my finger pressing the button for the penthouse floor. It was time to meet the other Mrs. Harrison. The elevator ride up to the penthouse felt like an ascent into another reality. The hushed silence, the polished brass, the scent of expensive floral arrangements in the lobby. It was all part of the world Leo had built for her, a world purchased with my tears and my labor. When the doors opened directly into a private foyer, I stepped out my heels, clicking softly on the marble floor. There was only one door. I took a steadying breath, reminding myself of my purpose. I was not here as a scorned wife seeking a screaming match. I was here as a CEO conducting a hostile takeover. My objective was information and potentially an acquisition of a key asset. I rang the bell. The woman who opened the door was even more beautiful in person than in the surveillance photos. Isabelle Dubois was stunning with large, expressive brown eyes, flawless olive skin, and a vulnerability about her that was immediately apparent. She was dressed in simple, elegant loungewear, and she looked at me with open, friendly curiosity. There was no flicker of recognition, no guilt, no hostility. She just looked like a young woman interrupted in the middle of her day. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft and slightly accented. "Isabelle Dubois," I asked, keeping my own voice calm and even. "Yes," she said, a small frown creasing her brow. "My name is Amelia Harrison. I know this is going to sound strange, but I need to talk to you about Leo." The moment I said his name, her entire demeanor changed. The open curiosity was replaced by a guarded, almost fearful expression. "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong person," she said, quickly starting to close the door. This was the critical moment. I put my hand out, not to stop the door, but in a gesture of peace. "Please don't," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I'm not here to cause a scene. I'm not here to yell or blame you. I'm here because I think you are in terrible danger, and I think we are the only two people who can help each other." The word danger hung in the air between us. It was a calculated choice. It shifted the dynamic from a domestic dispute to something far more serious. It piqued her curiosity and her fear. She hesitated, her hand still on the door. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. "Leo told you his wife died, didn't he?" I asked quietly. It was a guess, a shot in the dark based on the profile of a master manipulator, but my gut told me it was the right one. Her face went pale. The blood drained from her cheeks, and her hand fell away from the door as if it had been burned. She stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, a maelstrom of confusion and horror swirling in her eyes. I had my answer. "She didn't die," I continued softly, looking her directly in the eye. "She's standing right in front of you." I let the words sink in. I watched as she processed the impossible. She stumbled back away from the door, her eyes wide with disbelief. I stepped inside and gently closed the door behind me. The apartment was magnificent, a showcase of modern art and designer furniture with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Central Park. It was beautiful, sterile, and utterly soulless. It was a cage, and she was its beautiful trapped bird. That's not possible," she whispered, shaking her head. "He told me. He showed me pictures. Her name was Sarah. He said it was a car accident 3 years ago. He was devastated." "He's a very good liar, Isabelle," I said. My voice filled with a strange, sad empathy for this woman I had expected to hate. "He lied about his dead wife. He lied about his name. His last name isn't Dubois, is it? It's something he told you to use to sound more exotic, more fitting for the art world he was building for you. The details were just guesses, but they were educated ones. Leo was an architect of narratives. Everything had to fit his story." She sank onto a white leather sofa, her face in her hands. "He told me his name was Leo Sterling," she sobbed. "He said Harrison was his mother's maiden name, a name he left behind because of a difficult childhood. Sterling, of course. Something that sounded like old money, like power. It was all a fabrication." I walked over and sat in a chair opposite her, giving her space. I told her everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't use accusatory language. I simply laid out the facts like a lawyer presenting a case. I told her about our 15-year marriage, about my design firm, about the house in Westchester. I told her about the Vineyard Fund, about the $2 million he had stolen. And then I told her about the Ponzi scheme, about the clients whose life savings he was gambling with, about the federal crimes he was committing. With each revelation, she seemed to shrink further into herself. The woman who had been living a fairy tale life was watching it crumble into a nightmare in real time. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, her body racked with silent sobs. "I had no idea," she finally whispered, her voice thick with tears and shame. "I swear to you, Amelia, I had no idea. I thought. I thought he was the most wonderful man I had ever met. He saved me. I was working 2 jobs, barely making rent, and he swept in and gave me this life. He told me he wanted to support my passion for art, that he believed in me." "He didn't support you, Isabel," I said gently. "He bought you. He isolated you. When was the last time you spoke to your family, your friends from back home?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a dawning horror. He said they wouldn't understand our lifestyle. He encouraged me to distance myself from them, said they were holding me back from my potential." "Control," I said, nodding. "It's the first tool in a manipulator's handbook. Isolate the target from their support system. Make them completely dependent. He's been doing it to you, and in his own way, he was doing it to me." A new emotion began to replace the grief on her face, anger. A deep, righteous anger. "That bastard," she said, her voice low and trembling. "He played me. He played both of us." "Yes, he did," I agreed. "And now we have a choice. We can be his victims, 2 women fighting over a man who isn't worth fighting for. Or we can be his consequences." She looked at me, a spark of defiance in her tear-filled eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean we work together," I said, leaning forward. "You have access to his other life, his other phone, his other laptop, this apartment. I have the resources, the private investigator, the forensic accountant, the legal team. He thinks we are on opposite sides of the board. He has no idea we can decide to be on the same team and flip the whole game on its head. He's in the Caribbean right now, believing his lies are safe, his worlds are separate. By the time he gets back, we can have everything we need to utterly destroy him." Isabel stood up and walked to the vast window looking out over the park. She was silent for a full minute, her reflection a solitary figure against the sprawling city. When she turned back to face me, the tears were gone. Her eyes were clear, and her expression was one of cold, hard determination. "He took 2 years of my life," she said, her voice steely. "He made me believe in a fantasy while he was destroying your reality. He's not going to get away with it." She walked over to a sleek, modern desk and unlocked a drawer. She pulled out a laptop and a smartphone. "This is his city laptop and phone. He keeps them here. He thinks I'm too stupid to know the password." She wrote it down on a piece of paper and slid it across the table to me. "It's the date he told me his first wife died." The irony was so bleak it was almost comical. In that moment, looking at this young woman who had every reason to be my enemy, I didn't feel hatred or jealousy. I felt a powerful, unexpected kinship. We were 2 strangers from completely different worlds, bound together by the deceit of one man. He had thought he could play us like puppets, but he had made one critical mistake. He had forgotten that puppets, when their strings are cut, are free to move on their own. And we were about to put on a show he would never forget. The alliance between me and Isabel was forged in the crucible of shared betrayal. In the 72 hours that Leo was out of the country, his luxurious Upper East Side prison became our war room. Chloe, initially skeptical, was quickly won over by Isabel's fierce intelligence and her burning desire for retribution. She joined us at the apartment, and the three of us, the wife, the mistress, and the lawyer, formed an unlikely and formidable trinity of vengeance. The energy in the room was electric, a potent cocktail of grief, rage, and adrenaline-fueled focus. We ordered takeout, drank copious amounts of coffee, and worked around the clock, mapping out our strategy on a large whiteboard Isabel had in her art studio. Isabel was our inside source, a treasure trove of information. Leo, in his arrogance, had been careless. He believed Isabel to be a beautiful, naive girl, easily impressed by his wealth and intellect. He never imagined she would be scrutinizing his every move. She gave us the contents of his city laptop and phone, and it was a goldmine. There were calendars detailing secret meetings, contact lists of his marks in the Ponzi scheme, and even draft emails where he practiced his manipulative pitches. But the most damning evidence was in his personal files. He kept a digital ledger password, protected of course, but Isabel had watched him type it in countless times. It was a detailed record of every dollar he had funneled from his clients and from our savings, meticulously tracking where it went. He wasn't just a con artist, he was a pathologically organized one. While Chloe and the Oracle, our forensic accountant, sifted through the digital evidence connecting the dots between the ledger and the offshore accounts, my job was to work with Isabel to understand the psychological terrain of the man we were up against. We talked for hours, sharing stories about Leo. It was a surreal and deeply painful process. We discovered we had been sold the same dream, just packaged differently. To me, he was the stable, reliable provider, the partner building a secure future. To her, he was the worldly, sophisticated savior, the patron rescuing her from a life of obscurity. He had mirrored our deepest desires and sold them back to us. We also found his patterns. He used the same turns of phrase, the same romantic gestures, the same manufactured stories of a difficult past to elicit sympathy. It was like discovering the love of your life was just an actor reading from a script. The more we uncovered, the clearer our objective became. Simply exposing him and sending him to jail wasn't enough. Leo's greatest fear wasn't prison. It was public humiliation. His entire identity was built on the perception of success, of being the smartest, most charming man in the room. His ego was his center of gravity. To truly make him regret what he did, we had to shatter that image. We had to dismantle his reputation so completely that he would have nowhere left to hide. The perfect opportunity presented itself on his secret calendar. In 3 weeks, Leo was scheduled to receive the Philanthropist of the Year award from a major New York business association. It was an award he had lobbied for, aggressively donating a sliver of his stolen money to the charity to secure the honor. He was even set to give the keynote speech at the gala dinner. The irony was so profound, it was sickening. He was going to stand on a stage and preach about integrity and community, accepting applause for being a great man, all while being a monster behind the scenes. It was the perfect stage for his downfall. Our plan began to crystallize, each of us taking on a specific role. Chloe would handle the legal side, preparing a comprehensive dossier of evidence to be delivered to the SEC and the district attorney's office at the precise moment of our choosing. Isabel's job was to continue playing her part, but with a new objective. She needed to plant recording devices in the apartment, and if possible, get him to talk about his business dealings, his feelings about me, anything that could be used against him. My role was the most difficult. I had to continue being the unsuspecting, slightly clueless wife. But I also had to become the director of this entire production. When Leo returned from his conference, tanned and relaxed, I welcomed him home with a hug that made my stomach churn. I was a better actor than I ever thought possible. That night at dinner, I played my first card. "Leo," I said, my voice carefully casual. "My Aunt Mildred passed away." Leo looked up from his steak, his expression one of mild, polite concern. He had met my great-aunt Mildred once years ago. She was a reclusive woman we barely knew. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry to hear that," he said. "It's all right," I said, dabbing my eyes with a napkin for effect. "We weren't close. But the strangest thing happened. It turns out she was sitting on a small fortune, old family money nobody knew about. Her lawyer called today. She left it all to me." I paused, letting the bait hang in the air. "She left me everything, Leo. Almost $5 million. I watched his face carefully. For a moment, he was speechless. Then a slow, predatory smile spread across his lips. It was the smile of a wolf that has just spotted a lost lamb. The concern in his eyes was replaced by a familiar, greedy gleam. "Amy." "Baby, that's incredible!" he exclaimed, reaching across the table to grab my hand. "This is life-changing. We're set for life, I asked, feigning innocence. "Oh, well, it's my inheritance. It's in a trust that I control completely." The smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. Of course," he said smoothly. "I just mean this is wonderful for us, for our future. Think of what we can do with this. We can finally buy that vineyard, no questions asked." The trap was set. For the next 3 weeks, Leo became the most attentive, loving husband imaginable. He was home for dinner every night. He brought me flowers. He talked endlessly about our future and how this new money would change everything. He also started subtly probing, asking questions about the lawyer, the trust, the bank handling the inheritance. He was trying to figure out how to get his hands on it. Meanwhile, Isabel was playing her part perfectly. She told Leo she was feeling insecure, that she needed more of a commitment from him. She recorded conversations where he placated her, promising that he was in the process of leaving his cold, difficult wife, and that all his money would soon be theirs. He painted me as a villain, a shrew he was desperate to escape. Isabel would send me the audio files, and I would listen to my husband's casual, cruel dissection of my character, my heart turning to ice. The final piece of the plan was technological. I hired a freelance video editor and a hacker through Marcus's network. I gave them the mountain of evidence we had compiled, the digital ledger, the bank statements from the offshore accounts, photos of Leo and Isabel on their secret vacations, snippets of the audio recordings where he admitted to his crimes and his deceit. I instructed them to create a presentation, a slick corporate-style video that would lay out the entire sordid story of Leo Harrison, the philanthropist. The plan was to hijack the screens at the gala during his acceptance speech. The night of the gala arrived. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the straps of my black evening gown. I looked calm, elegant, the very picture of a proud wife. But beneath the silken diamonds, my heart was a cold, heavy stone. Leo came up behind me, fastening a diamond necklace around my neck, a gift, he said, to celebrate our new fortune. "You look beautiful," he murmured, kissing my shoulder. "Tonight is a big night for us." "Yes, it is," I said, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "A very big night." He had no idea how true that was. As we drove to the ballroom, a sense of calm washed over me. The grief and anger had been burned away, leaving behind a pure, crystalline sense of purpose. He thought this was his coronation. He had no idea he was walking into his own execution. The grand ballroom of the hotel was a symphony of crystal chandeliers, clinking champagne glasses, and the low hum of self-congratulatory chatter. It was a room filled with the city's financial elite bankers, CEOs, hedge fund managers. These were Leo's people, his peers, the very audience whose respect he craved more than anything. As we entered, he was immediately surrounded, hands grasping his shoulder, voices lauding his success and his supposed generosity. He was in his element, a king holding court. I stood by his side, smiling serenely, playing the part of the adoring, supportive wife. Inside, I was a coiled spring, every nerve ending tingling with anticipation. I scanned the room, my eyes finding the key players in our little drama. Marcus was there, disguised as a waiter, his eyes missing nothing. My hacker, a young woman with pink hair who looked more like a punk artist than a tech genius, was seated at a table near the back, a laptop discreetly tucked into her bag. And Chloe was at a table near the front, looking every bit the high-powered lawyer she was, a silent pillar of support. The dinner was an agonizingly slow affair. I pushed food around my plate, my appetite completely gone. I listened as speaker after speaker took the stage to praise the night's honorees, each speech more platitudinous than the last. Leo was a master of feigned modesty, shaking his head and smiling, as if all the praise was a delightful surprise. He squeezed my hand under the table. "They really love me, don't they?" he whispered, his voice thick with self-satisfaction. "You've earned it, darling," I whispered back, the words tasting like poison. My focus was on the two large screens flanking the stage, currently displaying the logo of the business association. In a few minutes, those screens would become the instruments of his ruin. Finally, the moment arrived. The president of the association, a portly man with a booming voice, took the stage. And now he began. "It is my distinct honor to present our final award of the evening, the Philanthropist of the Year award, to a man whose integrity, business acumen, and commitment to our community are an inspiration to us all. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Leo Harrison." The room erupted in applause. Leo stood up, straightened his tuxedo, and gave me a quick, triumphant kiss. "Wish me luck," he said. "You won't need it," I replied, and I meant it. He walked to the stage, shaking hands, basking in the adoration of the crowd. He accepted the heavy crystal award, holding it up for all to see. The applause swelled again. He stepped to the podium, cleared his throat, and began his speech. "Thank you," he said, his voice resonating with false humility. "I am truly humbled. You know, when I look out at this room, I don't just see colleagues. I see a family, a community built on a foundation of trust." He paused for effect, letting the word trust hang in the air. This was our cue. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Chloe, who subtly touched her earrings, signaling to the hacker. Leo continued, "Trust is the most valuable currency we have. It's more valuable than any stock, any bond, any real estate holding. It's the bedrock of everything we do in business and in life. It's about being true to your word, about honoring your commitments." As he spoke, the screens behind him began to flicker. The association's logo vanished. For a split second, the screens went black. A few people in the audience murmured, assuming a technical glitch. Leo, focused on his speech, didn't notice. Then a new image appeared on the screens, massive and undeniable. It was the title page of our presentation, written in bold, stark white letters against a black background, "The Leo Harrison Ledger, an Accounting of Deceit." A wave of confusion rippled through the ballroom. Leo, hearing the change in the room's atmosphere, finally glanced over his shoulder. I watched his face as he read the words. The color drained from it. His confident posture faltered. The easy smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He turned back to the microphone, stammering, ladies and gentlemen, it seems we're having a technical difficulty." But it was too late. The presentation began to play. The next slide was a side-by-side comparison, a screenshot of our vineyard fund with its $2 million balance next to a screenshot of the same account with a balance of 0. Then came the flow charts, elegantly designed to be simple and devastating, showing the money moving through the shell corporations, Mid-Atlantic, Logistics, Apex, Global Consulting, and into the offshore accounts. The room, which had been buzzing with conversation just moments before, fell into a stunned, absolute silence. The only sound was the calm, female narration of the video which Chloe had recorded, laying out the facts of the wire fraud. Leo stood frozen at the podium, a statue of terror. His eyes darted around the room looking for an escape, but there was none. Every eye was glued to the screens. The presentation moved on to the Ponzi scheme. The names of some of the people in that very room appeared on the screen, listed as investors with the amounts they had given Leo. I could see them, men. I had had dinner with their faces shifting from confusion to shock to incandescent rage as they realized they had been conned. Then came the personal betrayal. A beautiful, professionally shot photograph of Isabelle appeared on the screen, captioned "Isabelle Dubois, the motivation." It was followed by a photo of the deed to her condo purchased for $3.5 million in cash by Leo's holding company. And then the audio clips began to play, Leo's own voice filling the silent ballroom. "She's a cold woman, my wife," his voice echoed, smooth and confidential. "We haven't been intimate in years. It's just a business arrangement at this point. I'm only staying until I can secure our assets. All of this, Izzy, it's for you." His voice cooed in another clip.